It's been about 1 week since the tragedy, and authorities are continuing their investigations into really what caused the fire. And the signs of ignored warnings are starting to stoke more public anger. Let's bring in Minmin, our China correspondent. And we are getting more information about these warnings, all these warnings that seem to have been missed. What do we know specifically?
Yes, and this is based on our Bloomberg's team. Our team's reporting after extensive interviews with dozens of residents, and it seems like there were lapses on multiple levels. As early as 2016, this was when the building was up for inspection, because under Hong Kong law, any buildings above 30 years old need to go through inspection. So Will Power Architecture was brought in, and they have assessed the building, they decided what needed to be done, and then Prestige Construction won the bid. And during that time, residents were already upset at the price they had to pay, 160,000 Hong Kong dollars, which they felt was too expensive. So they had written to the anti-corruption agency.
This is per resident?
Per household.
Per household, okay.
So they wrote to the anti-corruption agency to investigate this, whether there was any corruption involved, any bid rigging, because local media reports say that the entire industry is very ugly. It's very common for example, construction companies to set up multiple companies run by the same bosses, and they all put in bids. They're predatory pricing, where they bid very low prices and then add on a lot of additional unnecessary costs, for example. But anyway, they already, alerted the Corruption Bureau to this. And then later on, when construction started, they noticed the materials, including the styrofoam boards, the netting, and they raised concerns to the companies involved, both the consultant and the company. And they were so angry that they, in fact, had lit a styrofoam board on fire in a public meeting with the owners' committee, just to show how quickly it catch on fire. But again, their warnings, the concerns were dismissed. They wrote to the Department of Labor as well, and again, they were told that the materials were compliant, and they were so angry they actually overthrew the owners' committee that was overseeing the entire process. And the Department of Labor visited the site 16 times. They didn't find issue with the netting, because we knew the contractors were very smart. They wrapped the base of the buildings with compliant materials. Only the ones at the higher floors were non-compliant. But they did find other fire safety lapses. So they fined the company. They had issued multiple warning letters. And yet, here we are, right? So there are a lot of questions as to, first of all, whether the inspections were effective, whether the rules were strong enough, and why wasn't investigations done ahead of time?
Yeah, amidst all this sort of grieving, you're seeing a lot of public anger, whether, questions about accountability and the like. Tell us a bit more about the political fallout that we've seen, and how is this in any way, striking up any unease when it comes to Beijing?
Yes, certainly. I mean, yesterday during this press conference that John Lee had held, he was asked pointedly by a reporter whether he should deserve to stay on as chief executive. Of course, he sidestepped that question, but it's been a long time since we hear such questions, right? The last time there were very public calls for a chief executive to step down was in 2019, 2020 during the protests, right? And then after that, the national security law came in, and those voices were largely silenced. So we have heard that question being posed to John Lee explicitly at the press conference. And certainly, I think people will be watching the Legislative Council elections coming up on Sunday. Of course, it's not necessarily going to be reflected in the results, because it's a patriots-only electoral system now that is imposed by Beijing. But yes, there is some level of public discontent, and we can feel the anxiety from the government. If you watch yesterday's press conference, you hear the conviction in John Lee's voice when he talked about, how important it is to arrest people who are using this incident to sabotage it, and to take advantage of this incident for their own political purpose. And police presence had ramped up at the site near the fire. Volunteers were asked to clear out. The government is taking control of the donation drive, just to ensure that, that public gathering and the public display of grief doesn't turn into anger.